Welcome to the Metropolitan Golf Association Green Chairman Education Series. The meeting is adjourned. We're going to go play. So welcome to the new golf season. My name is Todd Pike. I'm representing the Executive Committee of the MGA. I'm currently serving as our treasurer. More importantly, and apropos for today, I'm a former Green Chairman across the stone wall at the Appomattox Club. Back about 20 years ago. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you here. First of all, thank you for coming. It's important that we serve a purpose of increasing communication between green chairs and golf course superintendents and the USGA and the MGA. We really appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to be here and looking forward to a good morning. Cell phones, please make sure your cell phone goes on vibrate. You can use your cell phones outside on the terrace. Please know that also that in about an hour and a half, around 10 o'clock, we will be having a break. So if you need to make calls, you can do that around 10 o'clock. We're going to go green, so you're not getting hard copy handouts of today's presentation. What you did receive is a thumb drive when you came in. If you didn't get it, please make sure that you take it. Also, we are going to videotape today's presentations. We will send that video to all member clubs, and we'll also post it on our websites so that you can share this for your colleagues or those in the club who didn't have a chance to participate today. Importantly, there are attendance forms at the end of today's session, so those of you who are looking for education credits, either at the Golf Superintendents Association or the PGA, can fill out that attendance form in order to receive your education credits. Q&As are important. So we've formatted the agenda today so that there'll be ample time to answer your questions. We'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so please feel free to ask questions along the way. Also, towards the end of today's meeting, we are going to be awarding the 2016 Arthur P. Weber Environmental Leadership Award. So hopefully you can stay for that, and hopefully you all have a chance to stay for lunch. We expect that lunch will be served around noon. So on to the program. We work very closely with the United States Golf Association and always have in delivering these services. Dave Oatis has been a wonderful friend to the MGA. You all know Dave. He's participated in this seminar a number of years. He serves as the Northeast Director of the Green section for the USGA. He's going to talk a little bit today about making time for turfgrass maintenance. So we all have the balance of trying to provide perfect conditions for our players or for our members, and fast and firm, or whatever it is that the members or the golfers want to experience. It's important that we make time for the long-term health of the turfgrass, and that's going to be the subject that Dave is going to be talking about today. A little bit about Dave. He attended Cal State, graduated from Cal State Polytechnic Institute. He was a golf course superintendent before going to work for the USGA in 1988. He became the Northeast Director in 1990. He's been a great supporter of the MGA, as I mentioned, for years, and in fact, was awarded the John Reed Lifetime Achievement Award from the Golf Course Superintendents Association of the Metropolitan Area in 2010. Please welcome Dave Oatis.
Thank you, Todd. And it's great to see everybody here. I was a little nervous when I saw the weather forecast, thinking that we might lose a few people today to working outside, or more likely, playing outside. So appreciate you coming and supporting this program. And thanks to the MGA, because they do all the heavy work with this program. I just show up and try to offer some sense. So as Todd mentioned, I'm going to talk about making time for turfgrass maintenance. And at this time of the year, when we have so much good weather ahead of us, It's hard to think about ripping things up, aerating, and doing all those sorts of things, but that really does lay the foundation for having a good season, both in the short term and in the very long term. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. So let's start with what do golfers want. I think most of us have a pretty good idea of this. You know, attractive courses, which is a very subjective thing. Certainly we want good playability, and for a lot of people that's fast greens, varying opinions on whether it should be green. Some people would definitely like it green. Some more discriminating golfers really care more about playability than the color of the turf. And then there's an incredible fascination with this thing called consistency, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but let me tell you, it drives everybody nuts, and I really just don't think it's a good thing. I mean, if we want perfect, consistent playing conditions, we could save a lot of money, move the game indoors, hit balls into nets, use simulators, and we could have the same lie time after time. I think inconsistent playing conditions are actually a good thing. It adds a lot to the game of golf. Whether you like it or not, or whether you think about it or not, more appropriately, we want reliable turf. And most golfers aren't really thinking about this. They want the conditions they want on the day they're playing. But if we don't have reliability, then we've got a house of cards, and that's obviously not a good thing. And of course, we've got to have access to the golf course. We've got to be able to use it. So that's when we go out and aerate, do some form of cultivation, and people throw up their hands, oh my gosh, we got to play golf. Well, we have to do those things so that we can play golf. Expense, I'm not going there today, but holy cow, we definitely need to start ratcheting in expenses because more and more people can't afford the game. And as I've made my visits over the years, I've so many times heard golfers say, I don't care about that aeration and agronomy stuff. I just want to play golf, Dave. And I, kind of hold my eyes in place. I don't let them roll, although in my mind, my eyes are rolling behind my eyelids for sure. Or they'll say something like, you don't understand, we have a short season. And those are true statements. They don't care about agronomy until the greens die or perform poorly. And everyone has a short season. We have short lives, for heaven's sakes. I want to play more golf. I want to play more golf in my next life, actually. So what are today's biggest problems? And I'm going to go through a bunch of different things to get you thinking. Pest problems. Perhaps the golfer that won't get out of the way when we want to aerate a green, perhaps. That's an old MGA official, which I won't name, but we can talk about that later. I'll let you know who it is for a little bribe. Maybe it's a committee that is highly functional and helping you become more so, or a committee that's maybe holding you back because they're not willing to do the dirty work that it will take to get the course to the next level, or the level they want to get it to. And then they're just golfers being golfers. That's a really old picture, but every time I see it, it makes me smile. Jim Snow took that in the 70s, and they're oblivious. The guy hitting the shot is oblivious to the fact that his wife or someone has buried their cart in a poorly drained area, just about up to the axles. That is the epitome of a lot of golfers. So there's lots of other cool pests to deal with. Earthworms, for instance. Now, they do a lot of really good things for the turf. They devour organic material. They're really effective in that. They improve aeration and drainage. And they were a problem at the turn of the last century, the early 1900s, and then we kind of controlled them without really even realizing it for about 50 years. And starting about 20 years ago or so, they became a real problem because the pesticides we started using then didn't have much of an effect on them. So they're a really good thing, but they cause a lot of long-term problems, and they make for very poor playability. If you've got a lot of earthworms, you may accuse your golf course superintendent of having just aerated because it can be that bad. So they're bad for playability, hard on equipment. Now, there is a reason they put me not right before lunch, and perhaps this couple of images are the reason. Those delectable little creatures there are white grubs. There's a bunch of different kinds. These happen to be really large ones. That superintendent holding them has a very large hand, so these are from a southern green June beetle, and I'll show you why they're delectable in a minute. But every course I visit has some grub activity, and fortunately we have a number of products that we can treat it pretty effectively. So as opposed to years ago where you sometimes saw widespread damage, you might see the odd patch here or there in a rough area where an application got skipped, or maybe didn't get watered in well enough, or maybe, of course, just was saving money and decided not to treat for a while, because that's a great thing to do. We don't need to treat all the time. So you'll see some isolated patches of grub damage, but generally not widespread devastation, unless, this is an image I took in Ireland a few years ago when I was at the Irish turf conference. They had no pest control, no grub control products there. So they had an infestation of grubs, and then some small animals and birds came in and literally rototilled the turf. And there was really not much they could do other than scrape up the damaged turf, reseed, and get on with their lives. So these are things that we deal with on a regular basis, and it's always amazing to me when you see those tiny little creatures in the hand on the right side of the screen, that they cause more problems for us by far than those big southern green June beetle grubs on the left side. Those are, on the right, it's annual bluegrass weevils, and I would venture to guess that there's not one course in this room that's represented here today in this room that doesn't deal with this insect. We've been dealing with them for 60 years, and they're harder to control now than they ever were before. So this is something we've got to juggle, and let me tell you, they cause a lot of damage. They'll take annual bluegrass right out of other stands of turf, and when they run out of annual bluegrass, they'll start working on those. Now these are two really cool new insects. They're not affecting our turf, but you need to know about them. If you haven't already heard, I suspect most of you have. But these are affecting our trees. The one on the right is the Asian longhorn beetle, and the one on the left is the emerald ash borer. Now, I'm sure every superintendent knows all about these, but those of you that are just golfers, course officials and whatnot, these are incredible pest problems that we need to be very concerned with. The Asian longhorn beetle attacks all trees and will wipe them out. They're pretty well quarantined, but they're right now, but they're being monitored very, very closely. The emerald ash borer, I don't know what to tell you other than it's out of control, and it's devastated the ash tree populations in a good portion of the United States, and it's in this area. I'm not actually sure that I've heard that it's in New York, but it's in New Jersey in pockets, and it's marching here, and there's no way in hell you're going to stop it. So if you have ash trees on your golf course or on your property, you've got some tough decisions to make. They're going to invade, they're going to tunnel underneath the bark, weaken the tree, probably kill it. It's going to look ugly before it kills it completely. And so I told you it's pretty widespread, right? Get this. It's already taken out about 50 billion with a B ash trees. And it's on its way to taking out about 100 billion ash trees. So here are your not so enviable options. If you want to protect your trees, you can start treating them now and plan on treating for at least 15 or 20 years. But I'm not convinced you'll get 100% control. I think it'll prolong the inevitable. And at the end of that 15 or 20 year period, I think the beetle's still going to be around. So if you quit treating at that point, I think you'll lose your ash trees, and you'll have wasted 20 years of treatment. Another option to me is to treat certain trees if they're critical for a few years and replant. That'll buy you time, prolong the inevitable essentially. And don't bother with treating the older trees because they're probably going to get another problem called ash yellows, but we won't go into that. Or what many courses are doing, I visited quite a few courses in Pennsylvania last year, and I was surprised to learn that many courses are just taking out the ash trees preemptively. And there's a good reason for that, because when they die, they get brittle very quickly, and they become very dangerous, very hazardous, and more expensive to remove. I heard several horror stories about people removing ash trees that had gotten brittle, and they don't fall the way they're expecting them to, and there are some pretty severe injuries. So because China is our major trading partner right now, and these insects have come from China, you can probably guess that we'll have more gifts from China in the coming years. So be prepared for more of these sorts of things. So trees in general are a challenge. Now, you didn't think I was going to talk about protecting trees, I know. But they always cause a lot of problems with our turf, both for maintenance, turf health and turf performance, and even the architecture of our golf courses. But they also present a pretty substantial expense that often gets swept under the rug because of debris removal, mowing around them. The surface roots are really damaging to mowing equipment, and so on and so forth. Trees are pretty damaging to the turf, to our bunkers. You've seen many cart paths ruined over the years by tree roots. And as I said, they're really hard on maintenance equipment. Shortens its life and increases repair costs. So all of these challenges that I've mentioned so far can be controlled, but they entail some level of golfer disturbance because of mowing around trees, because of leaf removal. Can't find your golf ball in the fall because of the leaves, the debris removal, which is always inconveniently timed, storms that occur around championships or member guest tournaments and whatnot. Now, I'm going to shift gears and talk about some other challenges. Dollar spot's been around since 1920, almost 100 years. It actually played a big role in the inception of the green section. Big outbreak was experienced at the Inverness Club in Toledo right before the Open in 1920, and the chairman looked around and realized there was no good information on turfgrass and turfgrass management. So the green section was started at that time. So it is the most treated for disease in North America, and I would venture to guess that most of the courses in this room could save a ton of money if you killed your fairways and regrassed them and went to some of the new cultivars of bent grass, which are incredibly resistant. Lots of courses in this room are probably spending $30 to $40 or maybe $50,000 a year treating dollar spots. Some perhaps only 20, but everybody's treating it, or you'll have a lot of it. And if you go to a new cultivar, you can cut those expenses down dramatically. Summer patch, that started to pop up in the mid-'80s or so. It really kind of got into this area of the country a little bit later, maybe late 80s. And it's a disease of Poa annua, whereas dollar spot will hit a bunch of grasses, but creeping bent grass too. And then anthracnose. Many of you remember the tremendous problems we had with anthracnose in the mid and late 90s. When I did visits, it was looked at greens, it really wasn't a question of whether courses had anthracnose, it was a question of how much did you have. And these two diseases, we've worked out the biology, actually with quite a bit of support from the Tri-State Research Program. We've worked out the biology, we can control them, but they're expensive to control. And these are reasons to think about regrassing greens. Now, there's a ton of other diseases that I'm not going to go into, but brown patch, bacterial wilt, whatnot, Pythium. I'm going to shift gears again now and talk about soil cultivation, because this is where we're getting more to the heart of the matter. It's expensive, it's disruptive, and it's essential. Now, this is a picture of a very old soil profile taken back in the 70s, and that's not a very good one because it's really a soil-based green that hasn't been modified. This is what many of your golf courses probably had 30 or 40 years ago. And it made for a very unforgiving system. You know, we have increased our cultivation to modify these soils to control the thatch. There's tons of thatch in the upper couple of inches to relieve compaction, to improve gas exchange, get better root growth, all those sorts of things. And there's no way to do it without disruption. Now, I'll be quick to admit, I started playing golf in the 1970s, and I'm guessing that a few of you started back then too, maybe even a couple years before that perhaps. When I was growing up, we actually played quite a few courses that had unirrigated fairways. And so you could drive a 350-yard par 4 hole with a lot golf ball, a steel shaft, and a persimmon or even a laminated wooden club head. That's because the ball ran so far. And if you had green conditions back there, by the way, those are not my pants, but I really like them. I had a pair similar, but they were in blue, and they were my game day pants, man. I was tough to beat when I had those on. If you had green conditions, you were either at a club that had irrigated fairways, or it was spring, or it had rained a lot. Now, if you look closer on that slide on the right, you'll see this is actually taken in the 70s by Stan Zontek. It was from National Golf Links, and that is not rough or intermediate rough. That is a fairway, and the caption on the slide was just, oh my gosh, you could hear his amazement at the great bluegrass fairways at National Golf Links in 1975 or so. That is very similar to what your intermediate cut would look like today. Matter of fact, your intermediate cut might have better density. So we got into the 80s, we started irrigating fairways, pretty much everybody did, but not too much in the rough. That came a little bit later. And just to show you how much the game has changed, look at the green speeds in 1977, 78. We recorded these at courses all over the US, and I just picked a few out of the Northeast. So everything in light color or red or yellow would be extremes. Red, really slow speeds below 5, and yellow is 8 or above. So most of the speeds were between 5 and 8. Matter of fact, the average was 6.5. So I apologize if your course is up there. If you actually want to know what the speeds were at your course, shoot me an email and I'll look it up to see if we have the records, because we, as I said, we have all this data going way back. And there was the mind boggler bottom right there. Oakmont had greens, some of them were 10-4. That was just mind-bogglingly fast back in the late 70s. So is the game more fun today? I'm not really sure, but we've taken the conditions to such a level that we have to do a whole lot more maintenance to produce those conditions. And that's really what's been responsible for driving up the costs. I don't know if it's made the game more fun. That's really not a question for me to answer. That's one for you to answer. But that picture on the right, here's the question for you. Is that a green in 1978 or a fairway from right about now? I would say that's indistinguishable. I don't think you could tell looking at this picture, and I won't tell you which one it is. But you could tell if you look closely at the golf ball. So let's go back to the soil profile and what's going on here. That upper modified zone isn't really modified. There's a little bit of sand in there you might be able to see, but there's a ton of organic matter, a lot of soil, and it's really going to be unforgiving. If it gets really dry, it's going to be incredibly hard and repellent of golf balls. If it gets soft or gets wet, it's going to be really soft. You're going to have scalping and darn near plugged lies. So we've changed that, and we've put a lot of time and money and effort and invoked a lot of golfer aggravation by just rebuilding our greens without taking them out of play. That's essentially what we've done. The slide on the left is a similar green that's just been modified with aeration and top dressing. Soil modification, core removal, filling of the holes, and all those things that you as a golfer just hate. It's made these greens what they are today. It makes them more forgiving. They play more consistently despite weather extremes. It keeps them alive in the summer and allows us to cut them a lot shorter, which is a critical reason for why we've done this. So we've done so much work in the top of the profile that now we're focusing our efforts down deeper on these old soil-based greens. So we're drilling and filling and creating a hell of a mess. If you saw this process underway, you would really wonder what the heck we were doing. But the effect on turf and the improvement in drainage and root growth and gas exchange and all those things are the reasons. It has a profound effect if you have that style of green. Now, if you were thinking, well, if I just had USGA greens, I wouldn't have to do all this stuff, you're wrong. You wouldn't have to drill and fill and do those more disruptive deep aeration techniques. You wouldn't have to go back in and put internal drainage systems, as so many of our old greens have done, but you still have a lot of work to do. Because on the left there is a properly built USGA green that wasn't managed well. They didn't aerate enough, they didn't verticut, they didn't top dress, so that organic layer, 2-inch layer or so at the top of the profile, is just sealed off. And even though the water, once it gets through there, will drain beautifully from down below, because this is a really good root zone next year, it's going to stay right up here, and you're going to have all those problems that I showed you a little bit ago: summer patch, anthracnose, moss, which I didn't mention, et cetera, et cetera. So even if you're going to build things right, you still have to put a lot of effort into maintenance. And I regret to tell you that cultivation takes time. It takes time to do it well, and it takes the time to do it if you need to do a lot of it. It's going to impact your golf season, but there's really no way around it. It's the bulldozer, or drill and fill and install drain lines, or rebuild and just continue to conventionally aerate, because you're not out of the woods if you've rebuilt your greens to USGA guidelines or some other type. So these processes take a lot of time. They're aggravating as heck. Most superintendents I know don't really like to do them, but they still put the time and effort. And the thing to remember here is that cultivation takes time, because we're dealing with very low cutting heights. We're cutting greens at 1/10 of an inch or maybe a little bit more, and that's about the thickness of a dime. And so there's really no margin for error when you're changing holes or when you're aerating greens, because any surface imperfection can result in scalp turf, uneven surfaces, and whatnot. So to do it well, it really takes time. And it amazes me that golfers sometimes say, well, let's just keep the greens open and we'll play around while you're aerating. And to me, that's really a false economy, because it slows the process down. You know, your worker efficiency drops way down. No matter what you say to your employees to, you know, ignore the golfers, just keep working, they don't. They still slow down and allow golfers to go through. And to me, you're invoking a longer period of disruption. And I think you're going to wind up with even more aggravated golfers. And from the practical standpoint, it's bloody hard to fill those holes with sand in the first place. If you have traffic walking on greens with open holes, the traffic helps close those holes and makes it even harder to fill them. Matter of fact, you won't fill them, in which case they're not going to play well, you're going to get reduced benefit, and it's going to incur more maintenance down the road, because you're going to have to come back a few more times, maybe aerate again, smaller times to help close them up, top dress more, verticut more, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're just really losing a significant portion of the benefit if you're not closing for aeration. So, how has turf management changed? Well, I've just shown you a whole bunch of ways that it's changed, and trust me when I say I'm just scratching the surface. We have vastly improved playing conditions. We're not going to go out and measure green speed and come up with national averages, but I think in the Northeast, if we did, the average would probably be 9, and with highs, and maybe higher than 9, with highs in the 11s and 12s, and lows not in the 6s, probably not in the 7s, maybe not so many in the 8s. So our maintenance programs as a result have gotten incredibly more complicated. And yes, we have a lot more tools because we have to do so many different things than we did years ago. And we have bigger budgets because those tools are darned expensive, and it takes a lot longer, and there's more moving parts associated with implementing all of these different programs. And so the bottom line is we're putting a lot more demands on the turf. So what do superintendents need? I think most that I know need a psychologist or a therapist. And perhaps this applies also to green chairmen, I suspect. Thick skin and actually poor hearing is a major aid for some superintendents and lots of green chairmen. But we need qualified staff, and this is another challenge that we're facing, because right now, it's really hard to get staff. It's very difficult to hire assistant superintendents. The turf programs don't have as many kids in them because of all different sorts of reasons. So there's almost a day, no day goes by without an ad for an assistant golf course superintendent. And we, of course, need continuing education. All of us do that. And education without experience isn't worth very much. So yes, we need those incredible tools that allow us to do the magic on the course, extensive, sophisticated irrigation system, sophisticated equipment, and this really sets the stage for our next speaker, Dana Long, who's going to talk about some of the cool new technologies that are coming our way. And this really fits into our labor issues, because in addition to having difficulty finding assistant superintendents, it's just hard to find laborers to operate our mowers. So more and more courses are looking at robotics and other types of equipment that improve our efficiency with respect to labor, but everything else as well, energy and product usage, et cetera, et cetera. So all those other things we need, but most of all, we need the time to use this stuff. Because to me, the number one challenge in turf isn't summer patch or anthracnose or emerald ash borers or any of those other problems. It's the pressure not to bother golfers. And I've said this more than a few times over the years, but we have greater demands. We put more pressure on our courses and more pressure on our the staffs to produce good conditions, and we don't want to make any adjustments in the golf schedules. And of course, second only to that is the desire for consistency, which I just hit on very briefly. It's a good thing to have the greens consistent within themselves, but to think that you can have the same speeds every day of the year, it's just not possible. The weather has such an impact on ball roll, dry conditions versus wet and soft conditions, PGR, growth regulator applications wearing off, fertilizer applications kicking in. We do a remarkable job of keeping them relatively consistent, but they're gonna fluctuate throughout the year, even throughout the day, no matter what we do. And that's just the nature of the beast. So it's not all good. So what are the solutions? And I think this is pretty simple. I think maintenance has to become the first priority, because at the end of the day, if the golf course isn't good, nothing else matters. The food won't, even the donuts might not taste as good. And that takes a lot for me to say that, if the course isn't good. So my proposition to you as a green chairman, as a course official, as a president, whatever position you occupy at your course or in the game of golf, put the key maintenance activities first. And then in between those, work in regular windows for maintenance. Because when you don't do that, superintendents are gonna go ahead and aerate, they're going to go ahead and top dress and verticut and apply growth regulators and plant protectants and all those sorts of things. And we have golfers out there, you're just setting the stage for an argument, and no one wins when you have that. So if the key maintenance activities are not taken care of, nothing else really matters. So put the golf calendar second. And if you do that, I think you're gonna have better turf, certainly better playability. You're gonna use your resources a lot more efficiently. Can you save money in the budget? I'm not sure that we can really do that. But you're gonna have fewer conflicts, because so many courses just have the stage set for built-in conflicts, because we don't have maintenance windows, and we're always trying to squeeze things in and around golfers, and it often doesn't go well. And by the way, whenever you're scheduling something major, an aeration event, have a backup date. Think about the superintendent's decision. As a course official, put yourself in the superintendent. You've got an aeration treatment scheduled, and the weather is really unfavorable. It's really hot, in which case you aerate, you could kill grass, or it's really wet, and you're gonna go ahead and aerate if it's really wet, and maybe not get nearly the benefit, maybe cause some injury. You're not gonna get as much benefit. What do you do? What decision do you make as the superintendent? If you go ahead and aerate and the weather doesn't turn out as bad, you might look like a genius because the turf heals quickly and you get through it and we're off with the rest of the season. If you go ahead and aerate and it's wet or it's hot and you lose grass, now you've done something that golfers hate to start with and you've made things worse. So you really can't win. That's why you always have to have the backup date. If the superintendent is given that situation and has a backup date a week or two later, he'll hold his cards and wait and go ahead and aerate or do whatever the cultivation treatment is a couple weeks later. If he doesn't have the backup date, he's got to make that difficult decision. Risk injury or don't do it, and know that we're not going to be able to get back to do it for a month or two at a time of year when it might be even less favorable for turf recovery and those sorts of things. So consider the timing impacts on your turf when you're planning your cultivation treatments. You know, if you're growing POA, you probably don't want to aerate your greens in August, or if you do, you're going to be a little bit more careful about it. If you've got bent grass greens, you really don't want to aerate your greens in September. So what you have and when your golfers' prime season are, when they're playing their most golf, really plays a big role in deciding to lay out how you lay out this program. Consider your investment in the golf course. This is some numbers that I got from a golf course superintendent in Pittsburgh. As a matter of fact, the article this is based on, somehow the computer changed my numbers, so I apologize if you can't read it. The total cost of aeration for this treatment was $33,000. So this superintendent aerated tees, greens, and fairways for a total investment of $33,000. By the way, that's 2001 numbers. So by today's standards, it would probably be $43,000 or $53,000. Think about the investment you've just made to do something significantly beneficial for your golf course. And if you don't do it well, if you don't time it right, if you don't close the course for play, get things done before the golfers get back out, you're wasting some portion of that $50,000. And that's one treatment for 1 year. Plenty of courses do this twice a year. So superintendents, they absolutely don't want to bother golfers, at least most of them that I know, because it irritates them. And for heaven's sakes, golfers pay superintendent salaries, so it makes no sense to irritate them. But the way some maintenance programs are set up, you're guaranteed to irritate them. You're set up for that conflict. So my suggestion is to do what I just recommended, set up those maintenance dates, set them way out in advance with flexibility associated with backup dates, and you'll be much better off. So my solution for this situation is absolutely close for aeration, close regularly for maintenance, and then also, this is a subliminal message, I guess, is keep thinking about upgrading your technology, because as we get every year further along and the new and improved grasses become more, get even more improved and become more tested, we're not using them enough in this region, and that's a big part of the expense that we incur in maintenance, the use of older grasses and older technologies with respect to soil-based greens as opposed to modern construction methods. So with that, I'm going to close. I finished a little bit early because I really want Dana Long to have a little bit more time for his presentation.